So then the three goats were walking. Oh wait, are we live? Sorry.
I mean, I don't think we're live. I think we're not live. We're not live. He's like, go on, tell me. It was something about ritual sacrifice.
Oh, that's a different podcast. We're not going.
Okay. I think there's something about our mics. Something's going on with our mics.
Uh-oh.
Maybe we should just pop into the live stream.
Let's do it. Let's do it.
Welcome. If you're just tuning in, I think we are live now. Let us know if you hear us okay in the comments, guys. Wait till we get some feedback here. I see we got plenty of viewers. Thanks for tuning in, and Mr. Bryan Doreian.
Hello.
Signing off. That was fun. All right, we'll see this time tomorrow. Great. Yeah. Awesome. Guys, thanks for coming back to the channel. Thanks for tuning in for this one. This is a very special episode of Mind Your Biz. And I have with me, again, the ever effervescent, as your $5 word for the day, Bryan Doreian. Thank you so much for making time for this, man. I know your schedule's been crazy.
My pleasure, Seth. I think as we've done a few interviews and chatted both online and offline, it's this is a look, serious topic, but I quite enjoy our candor and banter about all subjects. So this is fun. Absolutely. Awesome. So some people are saying large echoes. Some people are saying it's clear.
What I'm going to do then, I'm going to go with headphones then real fast.
All right,
on my end.
We'll do it. Boop, boo-doo-doo-doo-doo.
Nice.
Let's see. That might not work. Yeah, we'll see.
Yeah, I think it was probably I had the really loud speakers there, so I'm probably feeding your audio back in if we're trying to find blame there. So, ladies and gents, anybody who's tuning in, I apologize for my naked arms. I've never seen my naked arms.
You're not apologizing for it.
It's true. I got back from the gym. This is the time we could do this, guys. Scheduling is a huge factor in these kinds of get-togethers. So, man, how is it that chat keeps on disappearing? Come here, chat. There it goes. Awesome. So, guys, again, let us know what the audio is like down in the comment section. Let us know what questions you have. Again, definitely appreciate a super chat if you want your question greenlit or fast tracked, right, to be able to grab our attention, because we've got some stuff that we wanted to talk about a little more urgently. Both Bryan and I, we even brought some stuff for show and tell. So fancy that. We'll go back to full screen video for that. But I think, Bryan, we talked about beforehand how one of the most important things to start with is like, why? Why would a person even want to prep? And got this big graphic in the background, like, sure, it's a big scary boogeyman right now, but there's got to be other reasons, right?
Yeah. So great. The why, right? That big question. Look, prepping is an interesting, and we kind of riffed on this a little bit. Prepping is an interesting term, right? Like when you're trying to explain or give this overarching, like, well, what are you doing? Well, I'm prepping. Like, I mean, it gets a connotation of like, kind of gets put into a tinfoil hat type of a category a lot of times. Prepping short for being prepared. It's one thing to be optimistic in life, and then it's one thing to be a pragmatist and take a look around. We don't take things for granted. Being prepared, making sure that look, a lot of the society and realm we live in, we it's almost like we live in a disreality. Like, oh wait, food doesn't just show up in a truck. You mean water just doesn't run into my house? Like, these are things we take for granted, and so having an awareness of that, I think, lends one to say being very thankful for those things. And then in the case of it not being there, what do you do? And thus being prepared and prepping. So
yeah,
obviously in relationship to, COVID or, pandemic outbreaks or other, it takes on a whole new flair. Right. So.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, no, for sure. So this has been the catalyst or it's been drawing everybody's attention, right? It's a lightning rod, we'll say, not a catalyst. And everyone is saying like, oh my gosh, yeah, COVID-19. In fact, you can't even get away with using the hashtag coronavirus right now because it destroyed all the networks just completely. I was doing a little bit of keyword research here for YouTube, and it was like, nope. That's like, it's all the buzz is around this thing. But let's be real. In our lifetimes, we've seen swine flu. In our lifetimes, we've seen SARS, right? In our lifetime, we've seen the global economic meltdown. We've seen stuff that should be taken just as seriously as COVID is right now.
Yep.
So, like, how many warnings do we need to get before we figure out, like, yeah, we should probably be a little more prepared than we are?
Yeah. So as I was like this morning taking a shower, which is, usually where the deep thoughts can come, like bathroom deep thoughts. Sorry for that visual, everybody. But anyway, so like when you're, you weren't prepared for that one.
It's okay.
I've terrible jokes this early morning.
I've covered my arms again. They feel a little bit less vulnerable now. Thank you. I appreciate if you don't assault my naked arms like that again.
So it hit me of part of, I think, what potentially we're experiencing is there's like a reality check, right? So when people and in general, humans and others, we live in this sort of framework. We live in a paradigm of how we view the world, how the world, quote unquote, works. And I would say right now, I think some of the energy is coming in around like, well, what if this isn't how it works? Or what if it doesn't work this way, right? What if there is a breakdown of a certain element? And that's really in the forefront right now. So overarching that too, a big statement is a lot of times people can get sucked into fear, right? There's an element of being like really afraid. And I would suggest and offer that is not the most useful framework to then exist in, especially when you're thinking about yourself, family, community, et cetera. I understand it can be radically, sometimes overwhelming to have your whole worldviews or paradigms rocked. And you can go into a fear mode, or you can also go into take a deep breath. Perhaps things are going to change. They may or may not. And step into that moment, not from a place of fear, but from a place of, okay, things are changing. What's next?
Yeah, so. That's awesome. And Bryan, right now, I think everybody's got the perfect moment to pause and reflect. We're at that inflection point, right, where people can just make that decision. Am I going to make a fear-based response right now because of this big, scary boogeyman? Things are changing so rapidly, at least based on what I'm seeing in the news. And should I respond, instinctively, reactively, and make fear-based decisions like, I better go buy like all this stuff. I'm going to buy my way out of this problem. Or just take account of what you have, like you're saying, and try to be a little more level-headed and just respond cautiously.
Yeah. And I think, the big, all right, so the big opportunity, and I know we'll go into prepping and other elements and like details, is this, I hope for some people, allows a reevaluation of what matters and what matters most. And also it can lead people hopefully into a mindset of gratefulness, thankfulness for what we do have, especially I would say in the United States, where I'm located, you're located, et cetera, to be very appreciative of this. And then also to critically look at, well, again, what do we really need? And then start to reframe those elements of like, well, look, yeah, if the entire grid goes offline, what are you going to do? That's a reality, right? Like, oh, if the industrial food chain goes down, what are we going to do? Look, that's been a potential reality for as long as we've existed, right? We don't know what the next moment's going to bring. So at every moment, there is a potential for the way things were to not be anymore. And when you put that into your supply chains or your power or whatever else it is, it's good to then have that in your awareness field. So anyway.
Yeah. No, 100%. Starting with, I'm going to tritely put this into a little quip, having an attitude of gratitude.
Yeah, absolutely.
Hashtag attitude of gratitude, courtesy of Bryan Doreian. So that's awesome. Yeah. Starting there and taking account of what you already have and then figuring out, like, that's just good spiritual practice. It sounds like kind of sad that we're facing like potential existential threat to get there. Like it'd be a lot cooler if more of us like just chose that attitude, right? Chose to adopt that attitude and posture without staring down the barrel of like the most virulent strain of the flu in our lifetime.
Yeah. Look, other little idioms or sayings in every breakdown, the potential for a breakthrough, right? So you could look at this from a macro perspective of these opportunities of like potential chaos and like insanities because frameworks are changing. Like, look, everything's getting shut down. Things are getting shifted that weren't that way 3 weeks ago. It's an opportunity to pause and really look, right? And so I think that's part of what, this discussion will lead into what is prepping, right? With this mindset, with this attitude, et cetera. And then also like expanding that out, like, hey, this doesn't just apply to the, beep moments of life. Like this is a way of looking at operating and existing in the world. So yeah.
Not very cool, man. Hopefully to your point, Bryan, I sincerely hope that after our conversation, especially, we'll bring some people to the classically defined moment of crisis, right? Where people just decide now, like, oh, I hadn't been forced to make a choice before, emotionally, just at the very onset, emotionally and intellectually. I hadn't been forced to make a choice before. Hopefully, we'll bring some people to that point where they think, okay, I've been reading the news and there's all the other signs or whatever else. Maybe we'll give them a well-reasoned approach to getting there and saying, okay, I can change, and I can change, and I can hopefully adopt more of the attitude that you're talking about. We'll see. We can entice them. We can lead them. Can't make them drink. So, but let me do a screen annotation really fast. And oh man, the whiteboard option is just not the same anymore. But I think we're gonna have to make do with a little bit of red ink. And I'm gonna do. Okay. So place this right here and have an annotation going on the screen right there. Let's talk just a little bit about the very first bullet points here. And we've got this in the description down below, guys. Really wanted to ask about this, right? So the why should I prepare for lockdown specifically, and then grid down versus SHTF. There's a lot of, like, sometimes people jump from, zero to full blown SHTF scenarios in their mind. Nobody's saying that you should have like whatever that you should be going out to try to reclaim old like military surplus tanks and aircraft and stuff today, right? Like it's a little bit too big of a jump, right? But there are different scenarios that people can prep for, and they mean different things. So people hear prepping, like you were saying before, Bryan, and there's a connotation. because they think SHTF. They think of somebody who's literally built a bunker and who has 3 years of rotating food supply. They've got an aquaponic fish structure, so that they are literally growing their own fish stock so that they can have meat saved up for years. But these are the same kinds of folks who've spent years planning and maybe even live in a commune or some kind of like family ranch where they've got additional help to do it. It's not practical for definitely the single dude living alone, or even for the single family that has, 6 or fewer people in it. That's really hard to achieve. So let's walk this conversation of prepping back from the full-blown SHTF, and let's get into just lockdown, because that's what the news is indicating could happen across the US and Canada now.
Yep.
So like if in the US and Canada, where we're used to certain services just happening, like you say, the utilities just run, you open the tap, water comes out.
Yep.
Flip the switch, lights go on. That's lockdown, right? If you can do those things, but you're not allowed to leave, right? You're not allowed to send your kids to school, for example. For parents who work not at home, that's going to take a toll on your infrastructure, right? Your domestic infrastructure. That's lockdown. And then the next step, right, is imagine that plus when you flip the light switch, they don't turn on. Or open the tap, no water comes out. That's grid down. Just so we have some working definitions there. And then SHTF is that plus no rule of law.
Yeah, that's a whole other can of worms. So I think the thing to do is, dialing back into, call it being wise or whatever you want. Look, you don't even have to call yourself a prepper. Having food on hand, right, in a worst case scenario type of, look, I can actually look, and again, I'm saying this with the understanding, the ability to actually have surpluses of food is itself a gift, right? Is itself an incredible thing that if you have access to do that, like you should count yourself very, very blessed. So just putting that out there. But that being said is, like if you have an ability to have I'll just say it, like the ability to store grains, quinoa, chia seeds, dried lentils, etc., things that will store for a period of time, which you will probably hopefully use anyway, like it's part of your daily cooking regime, or I'll say it, canned foods, etc., right? That maybe it's part of your daily cooking regime. Having an extra amount that's there, even for a few days, is huge, right? I mean, again, it's just going back to the simple thing of, let's say all your stores in your area don't have food. And I'm not even talking about the scenario we're in right now with COVID, et cetera, just in general practice. There's nothing like, okay, that's great. You're just saying like, I'm prepared. It's like, look, I don't want a fire to come into my house, but if I'm on the second floor of the house and there's a fire, I have a ladder to get out, right? Yeah. It's, I don't know if you did that as a kid. My parents would always say like, hey, if there's a fire, this is what you do, right? You go down, you check this, you do this, you do this. And if you can't find us, this is where we meet. Preparing. Yeah. So in the same way, just those little simple things. And I'll focus on the food element. We'll talk about water, et cetera. Starting there as a baseline, even now, whether COVID, whether we go into a lockdown scenario, whether there are these rollouts, remains to be seen. But even just starting there is good practice in general. So I don't know. Do we want to go into like some of the like, hey, what do you think in these scenarios to have on hand?
Well, let's get to that in just a minute. What I wanted to do is just start for the why in some of these right here with the lockdown versus grid down versus STHF. Like why prepare for lockdown? I think you brought it up very, very, very succinctly before, right? In talking about how it's just a good spiritual practice. I mean, for all of these, it's just a good spiritual practice to just decouple your self-concept from all the crap you have and try to figure out what's the bare bones minimum that I could get by with, and can I be more appreciative of the stuff that I already have? So it's just, in the beginning, I don't even care if you're like not a person of faith or whatever who's tuning in. Like, it's just a good spiritual and emotional practice to, like you were saying before, Bryan, just stop being so focused on the stuff. And then if you do have stuff, be more grateful for it. But lockdown specifically, why prepare for lockdown? It's imminent. All the news media is talking about it. there are areas of the world, and not as many in this country, that are already doing a form of lockdown and quarantine.
Yep.
Right? I think parents in Japan are now being required to keep their kids at home for a month.
Yep. So yeah, at that point, what do you do? And if you can't get out to a store, what do you do? So
yeah.
And that's why, this is, and I'll keep coming back to it, using this current scenario that we're in as a model for, past years and potentially future years of just being prepared. Again, the hence of prepping. So do you have, a food supply on hand? Can you feed your family or yourself, or have an ability to have surplus for 4 weeks, 5 weeks? Right? Like if we look at this in the time frame of, okay, there is a viral infection that's going around, a life cycle of X, can you basically sit at home and survive and thrive and have a chance to maybe like actually check in with yourself, but still have food and or access to water, right? So that quickly goes into, we've been focusing on food, water,
yes.
Right? So,
yeah, let's jump into that then. It sounds like then if there are any questions in the comment section really fast, I'm going to just take a temperature test there. I've got some questions regarding like how much food supply to have, and like for catastrophe, right? Catastrophic shutdown and what they're really referring to, they might not know it. They're referring to grid down. If you don't have access to food for 3 months, that's grid down.
Yes. Yeah.
That's not lockdown. Let's be clear. You don't need a 3-month food supply for a lockdown like Japan is experiencing. Some of their services will still be intact. Their utilities are not shutting down.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's lockdown. Just to get a clear definition and understanding, lockdown means weeks, sometimes measured in months, not usually measured in quarters.
Yeah.
And then grid down usually means that you've had a lockdown for so long, or it's so severe that municipal systems and utilities can't run. Yeah, right. Yeah. They just can't run. You've got the same restrictions being placed on city officials and on people who are providing that infrastructure that are being placed on you. Ergo, they can't go adjust the levees, right? If you have a local water supply, or they can't go manage the wells, or they can't go do the local water reclamation facility, right? To make sure that you got everything being refreshed. So you may be able to turn on the tap, but what comes out is not potable, right? You're not going to want to rub it on your face.
Yep.
So yeah, let alone ingest it, right? Like these things can happen, but that's grid down. Just to be clear that we have a working definition. And then SHTF, let's so Bryan, in your mind, how far past grid down do we have to go to hit SHTF?
I don't like going there in general, but again, to define the term.
Keep it good for mixed company then.
That would be a, so we can look at it from a couple frames, right? You can have an imposed SHTF, right, element, and then you could have a what I would say, and this is again why I was hoping, and I will continue to say, operating from a place of fear will not be the highest element of good for yourself and the world, right? Okay. Because in most of the elements that I've ever seen, thought of, or let myself go into about like an SHTF moment is when fear starts to churn, right? So it's when individuals, families, nations, etc., go into a spiral of attachment, right? Like there's this clinging on to, well, this is how life used to be, or this is how a way used to be. And then, oh my goodness, like I don't have access to food, or I don't have access to water, or, everybody's around me is, etc. And people just go, screw this. And it turns into, well, every man for himself, right? Which tends to be a fear-driven element. And you could call it survival, no judgment around it, but that tends to be those moments, right? So you could have an SHTF moment hit in 2 minutes. I mean, hate to say it, but let's say, somebody comes in and says, no, all of you that are long-haired and have hodl hats on, you're not allowed to do X anymore, right? And if there's enough pressure that's built up, that can turn into an SHTF moment, because if you've got enough of an outlash and et cetera, things can get overturned in a second, right?
Sure. Well, Bryan, to your point right now, I'm just going to quickly interject. There are some people on crypto Twitter, for example, which is like I kind of most commonly are seen, right? Where we're spending probably the most time together is on Twitter, just seeing stuff happen there. But on crypto Twitter, there was one person who mentioned that she went to a doctor's office and that there was a young Asian girl who was wearing a mask and coughing, and she was being treated very poorly by people in public. And it's like, we don't have really many confirmed cases here stateside, and like we're just starting to get a sense for where there could be potentially some contagion specifically for COVID. But this poor girl is being treated like garbage in her home country.
And mind you, if you look at like every single photo, or like my experience when I traveled, like Americans don't tend to wear face masks when they travel, right? There's other cultures that's just common practice. They've been doing that for, and mind you, air pollution in other cities and countries is way worse. So it's just like a habit of like, oh, I'm going outside, then I'm putting on one of these, right? It's like here, I'm going outside or I'm traveling. And this just is like standard habit. Like, oh, it's cold out, I put a hat on. Oh, I'm going outside, I'm putting a face mask on, right?
Yeah. I mean, Shanghai, dude, the air quality in Shanghai for years. I mean, you didn't need to smoke. Your lungs would get worse by just not wearing a mask than you would by smoking there. It's insane.
So I think, that goes back to this, like, people are on edge and like fearful. And I understand that. And then again, I'm not going to go down that rabbit hole, but yeah.
Got it. Okay. So I think I hear what you're saying. What I'm going to offer then as a little bit of a way to make it a little more pleasant for people to think about is SHTF. It goes far past grid down. It means that what we're used to in terms of having there be a polite social and governmental infrastructure in place is just not there. There are some people who refer to it as a without rule of law, WROL situation. More pleasant, right? But without rule of law. It's one way to define SHTF, just meaning that you don't have, like, if you do think that something really bad is about to happen, maybe you do have the full 10, 15 minutes that it would take to call a cop and have him show up at your house. Maybe you have less than that. Usually you do, right? But maybe you have that full time. Even if you make the phone call, there's no 911 operator.
Yep.
That's SHTF, right? So that's the point at which, when we can talk about this just a little bit, but I think people are asking right now, how far do I have to prepare? Right now, if people are saying that the contagion, it seems likely to go worldwide, first off, and be really pervasive, become a reality for every neighborhood and every borough across the United States and Canada, where we're not used to seeing this, right? But SARS, we did see SARS, and we did see swine flu. H1N1 was a bit of a pain. Right, I knew people personally who had been infected and who had fallen ill because of it, and that was in La Crescenta, California. This is not a place known for its really, really bad hygiene.
Yep.
Right. So, yeah. So I think to believe that it's not going to be, the contagion isn't going to continue to spread, probably misguided. But to what extent do you need to prep? First off, I think lockdown, maybe grid down. Without rule of law, unlikely. In most first world countries, just not likely at all. The idea that you're going to have to be shooting at your neighbors over scraps of food. Nah, I don't think that's realistic today.
Oh, no. No.
Yeah. And to your point, with the mindset of like, well, hey, I don't want to hurt anybody, but people are trying to hurt me. Like, I don't think that's likely.
Yeah. Yep.
So just wanted to start there, guys. And why would you want to prepare for some of this stuff? Well, lockdown, obvious. Grid down, possible. I don't know. Ryan, what do you think? Based on what you're seeing in the news, could we maybe see grid down?
So, again, and I'll offer this. There's what the news is presenting. And then there's what we don't know, right? Or what we know that's not being presented. So, and that's a whole other discussions for other times. So look, we have to start here too. And this is, and I got to put this out. The narratives that have come out around this are so befuddling at times. It's kind of like, what are we going to believe in this? Right? There is hard numbers that are coming out. And then there's like, oh my God, like it started that this was coming out of a meat market with bats, and then maybe a meteorite brought it in. And then there's this whole narrative around where and how this started. That's a can of worms. I know we're not going to go down that one, but I think it does beg the question of, okay, what's being presented? What's the misinformation that's being presented? The whys, why is it being, presented this way, et cetera. So, I definitely feel right now having some level of preparedness, 3-4 weeks is wise.
Yeah.
For in general, any just backup. Like, it's like, hey, why do people put backup generators that, can, power your house for 3 hours or 10 hours or 2? Like, yeah, I know it's a luxury. It's nice, but also it's like, it's, a level of security and elements. Same thing with food. So having a, lockdown scenario, look, I think I don't know. It just seems like a lot of the news and agencies are going to restrictions on, say, travel, or saying, hey, look, just for general safety purposes, everybody stay home for 3 weeks, right? Like, schools are shut down, et cetera. So at that point, like, okay, then you'll want to have those supplies on hand.
Yeah.
I don't foresee a grid down scenario. I mean, I just don't get that sense right now. And part of it too is because I'm seeing these two camps. There's one camp where this is there's a push to have a huge fear element that comes out of this. Not that this isn't serious, not that the COVID-19 or any type of a viral infection is not like serious. And at the same time, I always look at the other side of the story, right? So it's like, not that this isn't happening. I always look at the other side of the story of what's not really being talked about. And then it's like, okay, are there therapies, treatments, et cetera, that are in play? Yeah, I mean, you'll hear some, right? I know, like, we won't go down into it, but you'll hear like, oh, Gates Foundation and et cetera, working on, vaccines and like, I'll put that in that camp. And then there's other elements of like, oh, okay, between combinations of different elements you can do. It's like, that's basic hygiene, preparedness, et cetera, that have a huge effect. So.
Yeah, no, for sure. I think what we saw also with H1N1 is that the moment that we were able to create a vaccine here stateside, man, that went to market like that. Do you remember?
Yes.
I mean,
oh yeah.
And it was easy. Oh, yeah. And even people who were like, whatever, conscientious objectors towards vaccination, whatever else, like, it was like, oh no, you got some other ways to take this vaccination. The most common one was a nasal shot that was that I think they used a sort of like synthetic egg albumin as a carrier. And so it was essentially like you were forcing the vaccine to be sneezed into your nose.
Yeah.
So to speak. Like, it was painless. And sure, the symptoms hit the way they would like with any vaccine. So without going there, I'm just going to say that when H1N1 a vaccine was finally created, it didn't take long for it to have broad reach in the United States. So yeah. I'm with you. This particular threat, coronavirus, I just don't think we have to worry about it being so pervasive that it's like end of days, The Walking Dead style craziness, or even grid down.
Yeah, I mean, look, SARS was a coronavirus, right? So that's the other thing too. I know this is a different strain, engineered strain, I guess you could say. So that's part of that rabbit hole. But coronavirus has its own sort of categories. This is different in its terms of ease of transmission and virality. But it's a different category. So look.
Decentralized says we're all gonna die. He's giving you a shout out.
I mean, it's true. We will at some point, like our physical bodies, right?
But not today, bro. Not today.
Yeah, exactly. So, I don't know. So, yeah. So, awesome. So back into then like grid down, probably not. Like, I don't have a sense or a feeling that this is going to result in a grid down scenario, right? But again, this goes back into the category of, well, how do you prepare for a grid down scenario, right? What do you do? I don't see that happening in this case, quite frankly. Can I see there being restrictions put on place? Yeah, absolutely limiting, but I don't see a grid down scenario. It's just awesome. Me personally. So
awesome. And I agree. Totally agree. What's crazy? The annotations here on Zoom are just, apparently they're ephemeral. So I get to type them once, and if I try to respond to comments, I don't get to. So we're gonna have to do a little bit of kind of distribute the workload here, guys. Sorry, in the comments, I won't be doing any text responses now because I'm doing the annotations on screen. Brian, I totally agree, man. Grid down just seems so unlikely, man. It seems so unlikely. And T-Bone brings up an interesting and important fact in the comment section. He says that 100% of all people who drink water eventually die. So mind your water. We'll come back to that though. As far as like not dealing with grid down scenario per se, as far as a reasonable amount of preparation, let's talk about where to start, man. Because everybody says, oh, well, you know, you should go and like basically go ape the Mormons. They have a year's food supply, don't they? Like every Mormon has that. If you've ever known a Mormon person, like you hear about that, but that's not necessarily required for a situation like what we're facing in lockdown, right? Yep. Lockdown. Not only that, a year's supply of food storage is a serious commitment. I've personally known people based on my upbringing who've had a year's supply of food completely go bad. And then another one completely go bad. And then another one completely go bad because they didn't rotate it and they didn't get anything they were willing to use. Yep. So where do we actually start, man? I think you brought up a brilliant point before. Everybody's saying 1 to 3 months of food, or should it be 3 to 6 months? Should it be 6 to 12 months of food? And I think that completely misses the mark. We talked about this on the last time we met up for a video televised chat. Food isn't your problem. It's not your most immediate problem in lockdown. Yeah.
I mean, this is chat. This is not your immediate solution, but again, we talked about this in the last one. This is a life straw, right? So water. I mean, at the end of the day, having access to water is huge. So, and again, in a scenario where in a lockdown, will you have running water? Yeah, most likely. Is it possible you might not? Sure, anything's possible, but having water, either, you know, reserves, if you've got a well, like obviously like that's huge too, right? Because again, in a scenario where you can still pump your own water, assuming you've got a manual well pump, that's awesome. But again, if you've in a crazy scenario, right? If you have to go into a sort of grid down, if we ever get to that, these guys, those life straws, right? Any water source, here you go. You've got potable, drinkable water, or like having your water purification tablets, right? Like you can get them from REI, Amazon, wherever. You know, the main ingredient in that is CD, right? And that goes off into another discussion realm, but you know, it kills pathogens, you know, bacteria, etc. And now you got potable water. So having access to water, huge.
Yeah. And that's, so to go back what you're saying, that's if we ever near grid down. And so like grid down, of course, you have to have your own water. There's no way to get that piped in if utilities just stop unexpectedly. But what I'm going to do is just backpedal a little bit and say with lockdown, because we don't know how extensive lockdown can be, and because we don't know how it will affect individual municipalities, cities, states, we could have, for example, in the larger, more densely populated areas like San Francisco, they've already got sanitation problems. People already have serious problems just not getting certain diseases living in LA too. Yep. So we've got serious infrastructure problems already on the street, definitely on the street level. In homes that are in outlying areas, not so much. It runs just fine. But if you're in a lockdown and you do happen to live in a major city, you should probably be thinking about, even just for lockdown purposes, having some way to purify or some way to store water. That's my take on it.
Absolutely. So no, I'm with you on that one, 100%. 100%.
Yeah. So I lived in Miami for a while, and man, the water that came out of the tap there was literally, not exaggeration, it was green. If you put it in like a clear container and put it next to the window, it would shine green right through. Terrible stuff. And that was their clean water that came out of the tap.
Yeah.
So yeah, if you're in any major city center, like, and I would say like just personally, like if you know that like the population of the city that you live in is 1 million people, not a bad metric, right? To just say like, oh, 1 million people here, we could have problems with water.
Real quick.
Yeah. Might take fewer than 1 million people, right? Even just a really large city, right, of 250,000, you could have problems with water infrastructure there as well. But so anyway, just throwing it out there. Wes in the comments is saying, water is life, bro.
Yes.
Yeah. Everything else comes from it. So yeah, start with water. I think. And even for lockdown, and I'll go back and walk that back even more. If you're in a slightly smaller town, at least have a really solid plan. Bryan, like you were saying before with your parents and just the fire escape plan, like what's your basic strategy for if you know that the water reclamation for your area, if that's what your city deals with or your town deals with, if water reclamation gets compromised, because they're already dealing with removing pathogens from the water, maybe they're just not prepared for a threat of this type. If they think there's a scare of having something like this new strain of coronavirus enter the water system.
Well, so right there, you bring up the point, right? So in those scenarios, they're using different chemicals or using different treatments that they have to obtain from somewhere, right? And let's say that somewhere happens to be, I don't know, China, right? Then they're unable to get the resources they need to do that water reclamation, to do the purification, et cetera, which means when that supply is gone, and I'm probably sure they don't have a 4-week supply on hand, it's probably, weekly, daily shit. Who knows, right? I'm not going to judge that. But in that type of a scenario, yeah, now you're looking at potable water, flushing, et cetera, or drinking, it's gone. And I don't know what a municipality would do, but I can't imagine they would just keep running that water through out to the systems when maybe they will, but when it's garbage. So
yeah. Hey, so we're really fortunate right now. I'm noticing the comments. If I don't know if you're familiar with Not Your Normal Miner, a guy named Wes, who apparently works in water, which is awesome. So he's mentioning in the comment section here, he says, work in the water business, there's been a shift to more people trying to figure out how to purify their own. Yeah. And I mean, that's definitely true on Amazon. What I'll say right now, as far as preparation for water, you brought up a really great product that you showed right there. It was fully sealed in some kind of a Mylar bag, right? So that's an individual thing. I mean, sure, it's a pain in the butt every time you want to drink water to lie down on your side and get close to a water source, but it's what cups are invented for.
I mean, they've got others. So there's a couple different companies that do them, but they've got ones where it's like a 5-gallon bag, right? You fill it up, hang it on a tree. And then you've got that. They've got, I didn't bring it up with me, but a water bottle. So scoop it up with a water bottle, pump it, and then there you go. So yeah.
And we've got down in the description, we've got a link to a quick and dirty list. We'll say it's not exhaustive by any means. It's not complete yet, but we're working on that. Just getting more recommendations on Amazon for stuff that is either vetted because Bryan's tried it, or is vetted because it has the correct number of reviews and they're actually trustworthy. Berkey is the company that makes the Life Straw, and they also make a gravity bag, right? So that uses the same series of filters. So you have, like you said, a larger store of water, 5-gallon container. They also make some products, and then third parties make products that will attach, they're meant to be a cap replacement for a standard size water bottle, a classic disposable water bottle. So if you and I mean, there's no shortage of those, unfortunately, right? A lot of people are drinking too much bottled water. So the bottles are still around. And if you absolutely had to, just find any source of water and then just reclaim it by putting it into those bottles and having it on site, you could still just attach it to that same filtration system that's similar to the Life Straw, and then do a gravity feed that way, one bottle at a time. Like kind of labor intensive. But if it push came to shove, you could do that. So we've got options. That's what I'm saying.
Well, and then worst comes to worst. I mean, boil. At the end of the okay. So let's say Amazon stops selling these, or there's a run on them, or whatever. Okay, so go back to prepping. Do you have an ability to start fire? Because if you can start fire, then you can boil water, right? And not saying that that'll do everything, but in a scenario where you have to have something, that's a good start. So, okay. Right.
Awesome. Yeah. So boiling then, it's always available, provided that we're not in a complete grid down situation and you still have access to municipal gas or electricity, however you're going to normally generate heat. Or if you absolutely had to, do you have access to firewood to just straight up start a fire, or some kind of a stove or burner where you have some kind of fuel for it, right? What is this? Something like this.
There you go. So, so this is actually, I love these things. So this is BioLite. So these are they designed these, actually great company. I don't know them personally, but have loved their campaigns. from what they said, they actually were trying to solve a problem in third world countries, and I forget the specific area, smoke inhalation, right? So when you were actually, so indoor cooking, right? You've got people that use fire, wood cooking inside, and there's all this smoke billowing out. So they designed these cooking stoves, right? So it just comes apart, and they have larger ones where a series of fans will actually circulate, and basically you can have a fire with zero smoke emission. It's awesome. So just hot fire. And then they've got this nice little thermocouple pack, etc. And guess what you do? From the heat, you're generating power. So they did 2-in-1 where, hey, you can have your cooking fire, basically smokeless. And now you can actually generate, you can harness energy and convert it into something that can then charge this or give you a light, etc. So these are awesome. Like, this is super fun when you're camping, etc. Because now you've got basically a really easy way to start a fire, get it hot, and there you go. So they make all sorts of fun attachments, right? Like, there's your little boiler, etc. It's always good to do. Plus, like, kids love that, right? So
you're right.
In a prepping scenario, like, hey, these types of objects or tools are super duper handy. So.
Man, that is awesome. I love that one in particular. I'd never really seen anything quite like that one that you're showing with the attachment to do the heat conversion and recapture a little bit of energy. Man, like, bonus.
Yeah, I know. So they've got this, and then the other one that's really fun is they've got a larger one that's about yay big. So that's for more like larger cooking. You can have like a whole surface to cook on top. But yeah, these are fun. It's a lot of fun. Nice. It's so much fun when, like, again, like in a non-prep scenario or, non-lockdown scenario, or in a lockdown one, it's really fun to have your kids. If you've got kids, I've got 2, you got your fire going, et cetera. And then it's like, hey, I'm powering this. Look, how's that happen? I'm like, yep, think outside the box a little bit. So
that's so cool, man. I mean, to your point, also in lockdown, like with kids at home, having anything related to day-to-day infrastructure, day-to-day preparation, man, that's some of the best time you can bond over. Anybody in the comments, if you've ever gone hiking or camping, for example, whether with your kids or maybe nieces, nephews, or maybe when you were a kid, do you remember that kind of bonding experience it was? And there's no reason that you cannot have that every single day with food prep, or meal prep, or whatever it is that you're doing under lockdown circumstances, man. That's brilliant.
Well, and I think let's take this into the positive. Wouldn't that be nice to do that all the time with your family and others and or kids? And I know the scenario in the world that we live in, it is what it is. But I think these are the moments that allow us to pause of, okay, we'll get through this. That's my gut sense. So then how do we carry a different view into the next moments of life, of enjoying it with family or enjoying it with myself, even of like, hey, I'm just used to doing X. Well, what about this? What if I go outside and instead of cooking, I cook on my BioLite stove just because? Okay, cool. And now I have another skill. Yeah.
Nice, man. So let's talk about fuel source then. As far as there being a really good way to, and I've got to get annotations going again. Gosh darn it. I actually don't like the changes to Zoom lately, because now.
You hear that, Zoom?
I know, man. I'm going to go complain. Gosh darn it.
Stop him with it.
Where is. Oh dear. Yeah, they completely changed all this. There we go. I'm going to go to whiteboard, man. There we go. Boop. Whiteboard. Yeah. Here we are. All right, now we got a nice. And it doesn't work at all. Why? Whiteboard. Right. Why have you forsaken me?
So then write it down on a piece of paper and then hold it up to the screen. There you go.
Oh gosh. Right.
And then fax it to me.
What will it take? Okay. Well, let's just talk about this then. I was going to try to have some notes up handy. I'll prep this in like some kind of presentation later on. But as far as water, where we talked about water, like if you can store it, great. That's cool. But you have to clean it when you store it, or you have to keep it rotating and it goes bad, right? If you don't, right? Like running water is a pretty big deal. And so having water in the amount that you need, let's talk about, for practical application, how much an individual needs in a month. We've talked about that time frame being realistic.
What are they? What is it, like a liter and a half a day? Basically, like, I mean, you can survive on less, but in general, it's like a liter and a half a day per person, like an adult.
Sure.
So
That's just consumed though. I think that's actually consumed. As far as what you're using though, that needs to be clean enough that you're not going to spread contagion. I think you're looking at, it could be up to 2 gallons a day.
Yep. Per person.
Yeah.
So
hand washing, hygiene washing.
You're what, 10 gallons a day if you're a family of 4. I mean, that's conservative safety factor of, 2 if you're an engineer. So then that's what, 10 times 30 in a month.
And in practical terms, a drum gives you about 55 gallons. That's 6 drums.
Yep.
That's a lot of water, man. That's a lot of space.
It is. And if you happen to have the space, then that's the other thing we didn't talk about is rainwater. Hey, I mean, not for nothing. That's also something really fun you can do is how much water can you collect from a surface area, right? And you can do some calculations on that, but that's also a fun experiment to do even for yourself. Be like, how much water actually can you collect from, a runoff, et cetera.
Sure. And again, Angelinos or Californians need not apply. In case you didn't know, your state made that illegal for you to collect your own rainwater. So just in case you didn't know, the kind of people that you have working for you, they made those rules.
If you want to break the law, then you can.
Yeah. So yeah, awesome. Then rainwater, I know it's extremely popular in the South, right? In Texas in particular, rainwater collection is, it's also, again, it's not outlawed, so you can actually do it. And then in many other reasonable states, it's totally legal, at least. It's maybe not meant to be as popular, but totally legal. And they make larger cisterns, right? And larger, like actual tanks that you can then gravity feed into your own off-grid solution. But as far as the person who's just getting started and trying to make something practical today, rainwater collection, what would you say is kind of the minimum for somebody to just get started with rainwater collection? Because you bring up a really good point.
I think it depends on where you are. I mean, if you're urban, dense, populated city, it's going to be way more difficult to do that unless you get very creative of where you're going to hide said collection items. But that makes it more, it makes it more challenging. It's not impossible. It makes it way more challenging because you're going to have some sort of device that sticks out from the building. You might be violating some sort of compliance standards there. But again, if you have to, then, everybody's free to make their own choices. So I'll leave it at that. Having containers, whether they're, plastic and or glass, but plastic tends to be way more accessible for people. So having some sort of container that you can actually funnel into, and you could start with as simple as having, sheets collecting into a device. It's not that, I won't say it's not that difficult, but it also is, get creative. Like this allows you to tap into your mind of like, oh, here's a potential problem. How did we figure out a solution? There's no right or wrong way. It's like, well, somebody might have on hand, a piece of PVC that they can now funnel it in. Perfect. Right. If you're fortunate, if you've got land and access to land, tons of people use rainwater collections off the roofs, right? So they'll actually run those into drums, have overflows, et cetera. And then one decent rainfall on an average size American household, you will overflow your 55-gallon drums in a matter of 20, 30 minutes in general. Just it's insane how much water. So
yeah, awesome. So it sounds like then it is totally reasonable if you're doing rainwater collection. Why not just get those 6 drums if that's what you need for a family of 4, for example, or maybe that you're going to be that fixed point for your neighbor group or for your friend group. Again, there are going to be some people who tune in who, they don't have their own nuclear family close by. Maybe they're striking out on their own somewhere else in the big city. So if you know that you're going to become that fixed point for whatever your social group is, then yeah, maybe go ahead and just get extra drums. Even if you don't know how you're going to fill them, store them, or clean them later on, just get started. Right? They're not too expensive. They're not hard to find.
Yeah. And again, worst comes to worst, most people have gutters or downspouts. So in the event of, let's put it, in the event of if you need water, go get your 4-gallon or your gallon jugs or whatever, and just here, right? So
Yeah, very cool. So let's talk a little about some other alternate ways that you can potentially get access to really good storage water for right now. Some people are really big fans of reverse osmosis systems. They're, as far as like having clean drinking water at home, but man, those are so wasteful as far as the runoff water, right? So for every gallon of water that you're creating, like filtering, that is good enough to drink, I think you're doing something like 3 to 4 gallons of wastewater.
Yeah.
On your reverse osmosis system. Yeah. Going through that reverse osmosis membrane and then the other filters that you have in some of those closed systems there for reverse osmosis treatment, especially multi-stage treatment, you get a lot more runoff because you're just having to, swish it around more. And occasionally the stuff that you've ejected from that system, you're not really going to want to drink it. So let's just say, I don't know, in an alternate universe, right? Where somebody's saying, okay, we're not grid down. I'm not too worried about water immediately, but I've got this source of like 3 to 4x my consumption that's being wasted. What about recapture? Because there's rainwater. What are some other methods of recapture, do you think? And Wes just chimed in. He's saying it 4 is on the low side, sometimes higher than 4 gallons per treated gallon.
Yeah. Again, I haven't done too much with reverse osmosis, so I can't really speak into that too much. I mean, look, if you've got that, what is it, effluent, the discharge off of it, that if it's not potable, well, then you're going to want to potentially, you could use it as bathing. And again, I'm not going to go into that because obviously, like, your cells your skin pulls in what you're bathing in too. So
yeah. I don't know what the amount is, but yeah, the transdermal absorption after your shower, there's a reason you feel so good after you shower, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, well, so in this case, and again, this is where like I'm going into, look, and again, I do some things and there's a whole lot that I don't know. In my mind, I'm like, well, okay, if you've got that, what if you do have types of tablets, right? So if you've got the water purification tablets, et cetera, to be able to drop in, it's like, okay, so I got my super clean, good. Okay, backup is, all right, we've run out of that. Well, okay, drop some tablets in. I know I'm going to be better than just drinking this straight, right?
Sure. Yeah, that seems like really no nonsense. It seems like also, to your point, like you're saying, with just having water containers around, right? Like 55-gallon drums. If you're looking at around 4 gallons of wastewater per gallon of treated RO water, then, I mean, you're going to fill up that 55-gallon drum super quick, even living alone.
Yep.
Right. Like it's going to be super fast. Though treating it after the fact, like you're saying, some kind of chlorine tablets, like you were saying before, and people are like, yeah, I mean, if times are tough, sure, go ahead and put in a drop of bleach if that's what you have, liquid bleach if that's what you have lying around. It's not great, but it'll save your life.
We're not recommending that you do that, by the way.
Yeah. None of this is advice.
Yeah. It's look, go get your water tablets, from Amazon, or go buy your own chlorine dioxide kits, your CD kits, which you can buy. So look, quick asterisk. Like, can we go into this a little bit? Like, you've probably seen it. So the main ingredient in water tablets, right, which is chlorine dioxide, that is like what does your majority of purification. You can buy the kits, right? You can make your own chlorine dioxide at home. It's possible, right? Like, that's what you can do. That's the same thing that's in there. So obviously, all disclaimers to say, do your own research, just like in crypto, do your own research, make your own choices, but you have that ability to have way more access to water purification in the event you need it by having that on hand.
Yeah.
So.
No, brilliant brand. So I bring up the household bleach as like a dead last option.
That's an SHTF moment. Yeah.
Yes, that's like times would be really, really tough. I mean, in the same way that, like, some people are like, hey, you can whatever, you can get a buzz from drinking hand sanitizer too. Yeah, but it's not recommended. So yeah. Yeah, treat your body with care, right? There's some things you do only as a last resort, and even then, like, hopefully you're never that desperate. So yeah.
So that's an interesting thought too, and I don't know why this just like registered in my mind. So we'll sidecar into this. So I don't know if you ever played around with like intermittent fasting, et cetera. Like, I mean, that's starting to come back in. You can go back to like, historically as humans, like we probably where intermittent fasting, without it being called it, because it's like, hey, I've got nuts and berries and I'm going to go on a 12-mile hike to go see my aunt who lives over there. And maybe I ran out along the way, so I didn't eat for like 7 hours.
I mean, before World War II, it was just called Tuesday, man.
So,
we've had to toughen up again since the 1950s.
Yeah. So with that, it's interesting for me because I also look at this from the framework of people who break out of a cycle of like 3 square meals a day. It's incredible to have 3 square meals a day. I'm very thankful for that type of food. But then I've noticed that individuals who have like gone through intermittent fasting and done that, they have a total different mindset around what food is and what one needs, right? And so it's like, oh, I hate to say it, but like when you go through, it's just like conditioning and training. Like when you run races or you're doing something, when you experience that, you kind of know what your limits are as a person. So intermittent fasting, again, do your own research, et cetera, play around with it. Because if you know as a person, it's like, oh, I can go 18 hours without eating food, and then mentally I can go through that process. Hey, what does that do for you for longevity in terms of what you really need for food in a lockdown or a grid down scenario? So anyway, just a little that came in.
That's brilliant. That's brilliant. And I'm gonna, if I may, just like riff on that a little bit. Experiment with different macronutrient combinations. If, for example, you know that for your first meal of the day, that all you have available is maybe a couple of grains or a grain or legume, you're going to hear vegetarians and vegans say, "Oh, grain plus a legume is a complete protein." And I'm sorry, but if your body is not used to only eating that very small amount of essential amino acids, you're never going to feel it's a complete protein. And it's going to take some adjustment to that kind of austerity, right? Like, oh, okay, like we're on lockdown and I have to eat that. How am I ever going to survive? Because I'm used to whatever, steak and eggs first thing. Like you've got to know that a variety of foods won't completely throw you for a loop or make you weak and dizzy and unable to do what you would normally need to do.
Yeah, look, sugar detox is probably one of the hardest things that most, I'll say, Western American people will go through or experience because there's so much sugar and sugars in the diet that's consumed. So as you know, and even for myself, when I started doing like a sugar detox at one point, it was like, oh my goodness, all of a sudden fruits and vegetables tasted incredible, right? Because my dopamine and all my receptors in my head weren't just like firing for like that hit of like, here we go. I was like, oh, I can actually enjoy these flavors and these other nutrients that are coming out of fruits and vegetables. And wow, I feel way more satisfied. Anyway.
Nice.
So.
Nice. We're getting the important questions now, Brian. We're getting the important questions. John Spock asks, Snappy, any good remedies for coronavirus?
Wow. I'm not going to give you any. That's a what? No. So remedies.
So hashtag this part is advice. Yeah.
Yes. No. Yeah. No. Look, I think I would say do your own research. Obviously, there's a lot of stuff out there. I know from a academic medical academic type of research. Yeah, we can put the vaccine category in to try and say like, hey, we can do preventative, quote unquote, through vaccines, et cetera. There are whispers of other elements that have been useful in combating coronavirus, right? So, I mean, and I'll put it as coronavirus. COVID-19 remains to be seen, but there have been other treatments. So actually it's interesting because CD was used in SARS. It was used, I mean, look, CD is used in treatment plants. I mean, it's one of the main things they use to actually do wastewater remediation. You can actually, that's what you put in your water tablet. That's your water tablet when you want to purify your water. So there's been some discussions of that. Having that on hand for your water and
Hey, Brian, you're breaking up, man. If you can hear me, you're on your end. We're not getting a lot of data from you. So let me just double check my stream health. Nope, stream health is good. Brian, hopefully we'll be back in just a moment here, guys. So I apologize for the interruption. You got him started on chlorine dioxide, and maybe there's interference from a third party. Doesn't want that info to get out. But guys, this is like Brian is saying, the water purification tablets with chlorine dioxide. That's what they've always been. So as a product, there he is. Okay.
So in a grid down scenario.
So I was riffing, man. I was tap dancing while you were gone there for a second, and just saying that to your point, every version of commercial water tablets or water purification tablets have contained chlorine dioxide, right? So it's the secret ingredient.
Well, yeah, I mean, like, look, I look at it from I always look at other sides of things. There's a ton of people that are talking about, or a ton more people are starting to talk about, like, having those water purification tablets or chlorine dioxide on hand for potable waters, and possibly just for basically like, hey, it's kind of a antiviral, consumable in water type of exploration, right? I'll put it that way. And then I'm seeing all of the mainstream media be like, well, people are telling you to drink bleach. And that's why I was like, whoa. Like, when you said that, I was like, disclaimer. I'm like,
yeah. No, I apologize. So this is me having been raised in a culture of lifelong preppers, and also having been a Boy Scout for the full tenure that one expects, throughout childhood. So we always had those as like, that was like always, it was always there in the kit. We always had bleach in the kit, but you need bleach for other stuff too, right? I mean, so that's why it was always in the kit. And it was like, hey, don't go digging into this. And obviously never drank bleach, but like, if you had to, there was a ratio that we all knew, right? There's a ratio between bleach and water that you can use safely. You're not going to poison yourself, but yeah, that was always a last ditch effort.
Yeah, and that's like straight bleach, and then you back it into chlorine dioxide. So I think you also brought up a good point of it's like this information gap, like stuff that you were raised around, et cetera, of like, hey, this is just common sense, this is just common knowledge, and in a scenario where you need to potentially use this, here's what you do. And then as we've gone through like a couple decades, all of a sudden it's people aren't aware of that. Like, if you're not in that. And so it's all of a sudden like, yeah, but why would you ever drink bleach? It's like, well, you wouldn't ever drink bleach. We're not saying you would ever drink bleach, but it's wise to know what's possible, right? Like, in this ratio, you're not going to poison yourself. You won't die. And by the way, you'll have clean drinking water. Hi. Right?
Yeah, no, totally. If for whatever reason, maybe you're not on lockdown, maybe you're traveling, maybe for work, you absolutely have to travel, and then you're on lockdown in some place that you're not familiar with. The only thing you have available because, I don't know, you're at the hotel or you're at the work site, right? You're stuck at a facility where the work site, and I'm sorry, every single work site you've ever gone to has janitorial supplies where all you have is bleach and water.
Yep.
You won't die. So, So just again, worst case scenario. We're talking about worst case scenario, right? Getting locked down in an unfamiliar place, and all of your creature comforts are gone. To your point, knowledge is power there. Let's sort of flip the conversation away from water, and I think maybe we've hammered that point home enough. Maybe we haven't.
Maybe we'll see.
Maybe we haven't though, because everyone's still talking about like, but I need 12 months of food. It's like, you don't, because if you, for example, are storing 12 months of grain and you don't have 24 months of water, you're never going to be able to cook said food.
Bingo. Or let's say you have an abundance of seeds, which in theory is a potential abundance of food, but you don't have access to water. Issue.
Yeah. Well, and oh man, I almost want to go back to like water reclamation, and then gray water reclamation from your current systems. Even if you're not doing wastewater from RO systems, there's so many ways to get water put back to work for you. But yeah, maybe for later. We need to rip the Band-Aid off here, Brian, because I think like again, like we could just riff for like hours about just water in preparation, right? Water. Yeah. So shall we rip the Band-Aid off? Shall we move on?
Let's do it.
Cool. All right. So minimum kit for lockdown. Let's talk about. So we've talked about how like a without rule of law scenario or SHTF scenario is very unlikely. Yep. So let's scale things back to what's more likely to happen in the near future here in North America. So minimum for a lockdown, I brought some stuff for show and tell too.
Yay!
Yeah, right. So especially if you have a system like what you were showing before, you need lithium ion to be able to capture any energy that is available in the event of intermittent outages. Maybe you're not in full grid down, but you just have to make sure that you've always got a good battery backup. So, and I'm of the opinion that you need to at least have like a 10,000 milliamp hour battery backup with multiple ports right there, so that if you need to go mobile for a short amount of time and whatever, your creature comforts are just not available because everyone's in lockdown.
Yep.
You have access to your own power, and you know, again, it improves your OPSEC too. Like when you're traveling, never plug your phone into anything that you didn't bring yourself. So that is true of lockdown too. Even if you're just driving or walking distance to other places, doesn't mean that people aren't after your most sensitive data. In fact, I suspect we're going to see a lot more exploits in the coming months because people are vulnerable or being dumb.
Yep. They also do some cool, and I didn't bring it up with me, but they do some cool like solar like backup, like, you know, mobile ones for your phones or whatever. So it's like, hey, if you got sunny days, just plug it in and you're good to go. So
nice. Well, I'm gonna bring it back down to a more cellular level, right? Of lithium ion. If you can get your hands either on reclaimed versions of these or brand new in box, but 18 650s. This is the standard in lithium ion cell technology. It's the AA, right, of lithium ion cells. If anybody is looking and maybe doesn't know, and I've got such fat fingers, man. I make that look like a AA. It's dumb. I've got farmer hands, dude.
That's actually a 7-inch battery. Yeah.
But it can feed like a really nice flashlight, just a really good flashlight. You'll especially, hey, is that a torchlight? Oh, we just died.
Yep.
Laser to the eyeballs.
Yeah, which we hadn't talked about, but yeah, backups for light, right?
Backups upon backups. I would venture a guess, Brian, that's not your only flashlight of that nature.
No, and the other fun thing to do, and I didn't bring it up either, I meant to, is headlamps, right? So like, you know, all the simple headlamps for caving, spelunking, or whatever, they're not anymore. Those are huge because most people don't realize, like, when you got this, one hand's taken, right? I mean, you can do the whole tuck it under your chin and get awkward with it, but good old camping headlights, highly recommend as well, because now you got both hands free. So
yeah, and not only that, but most of these systems, like you're mentioning, the headlamps and a lot of these, like the quasi tactical flashlights, I'll call them. Yep. This is actually a knockoff of a tactical headlamp or a flashlight, because this particular design, try to get it as close as I can so you can see. You see the flared front right there, and then telescoping to be able to focus the beam. That's generic. It's a completely generic design that, I mean, now it's going to be harder to source this directly from China, but because so many resellers and people who do drop shipping have already imported these units by the thousands, plenty of these are stateside already. So if you're looking at this and thinking like, oh, well, I don't have a really cool lithium ion flashlight like Brian, something like this, there's plenty of them, and they ship with, you know, they'll get to your place with free 2-day shipping on Amazon or whatever, and they're cheap. Yep, they're way cheap now because this design is generic now. Yep. So not only that, but I mean, it's got the little was it the glow in the dark button on the back. So if you by end of day, it's all charged up and you can see it if the lights go down. But mine has first off the focusable beam right there. Oh yeah, and then light tap also cycles it through. There we go. Epilepsy warning. Cycles it through the SOS and then all the way back to full brightness. This kind of stuff is just helpful. Even if you're not looking at prepping, this is just a good idea to have on your person.
Yeah, if your power goes down, right? How many times does the power go out? It's like, oh crap, and you're in the middle of the dark and where's your flashlights? Like, yeah, have some flashlights around and might as well invest in like something that's not just your nothing against CVS, nothing against your CVS. Like your grandma's got those like little like pink neon ones.
No, Brian, I'm going to say CVS can go straight to hell. These are what you need. The stuff that's sold at CVS. Let's just talk about supply chain and get very real in this conversation. Supply chain, CVS is the bottom of the barrel. It's the barrel that's at the bottom of the barrel. You're scraping the bottom of that barrel. Don't get any of your prepping supplies unless it's specifically like drugstore related stuff. Your hydrogen peroxide, your rubbing alcohol, stuff that's going to go into your bug out kit or your first aid kit. Yep. Get that stuff there. But this kind of stuff, no, look elsewhere. You're gonna do way better at your closest Amazon warehouse here. Yeah. Right? And this guy, I think I was able to find a kit that had shipped with 2 of these to my door for under $20, man. And they came with additional 18 650 cells,
which is huge.
And a charger.
Yeah. Yeah.
So like I've got a dual 18 650 charger right here. Now, the one thing about them is that, generally speaking, this stuff is, I drop it in, and it'll. Oh no, it didn't. Oh, because I got it backwards. Drop it in, and it illuminates the charge light because it doesn't have any smart circuitry to keep it from feeding back. So, but this stuff is just great. Beyond that, Jehu Garcia has a phenomenal channel where he talks about creating your own like Tesla power wall, right, grid, and he'll show you how to combine stuff like this, but more practically, the flashlight that you have, the flashlight that I have, and then some headlamps. Yep. Some headlamps will also allow you to take out the little triple AAA combining mabob, right? That goes in the center. It's a little sleeve.
A technical term.
Yeah. Look it up. It's going to be written into law by El Trumpez sometime soon. But yeah, thingamabob. You can replace it with this. A lot of those headlamps too. So this becomes your new standard. And anytime you have access to whatever power reclamation tech, like you were saying, either a solar fan or like the heat recapture system that you have, get these guys going, because then you can put them across multiple different systems.
Yep. Great suggestion.
Just throwing that out there, having those guys handy, right? Like, the other thing most people don't know when they talk about, like, we used to be more aware of this because not every laptop had shaped lithium polymer inside, but the old school laptop batteries, they were this form factor, and when they went to lithium ion, they were exactly this unit inside. So when people would say, "Oh, it's a 6-cell battery," what does that mean? 6 of these.
6 of those. Yeah. Yep.
So if you had to reclaim some of these, you're going to save a landfill, and then you're going to have plenty of these on hand for backups.
Sweet.
So water, power, like you can't do a whole lot without those two.
Yeah.
So, but I'm a big fan of like harping on that. Like anywhere you can store it too. Just anywhere you can store power, store it. And ideally, if you can have a system that's going to give you better than 5-volt power, so you can then power additional stuff, then great. But if you don't, I create your own microgrid or get into other energy storage systems. Don't want to go too deep down that rabbit hole, but
yep.
But yeah,
that might not be applicable for just a general lockdown.
Yeah, but for a month, man, one of these guys, if all you had, like, maybe you want to just decrease your power usage because you know you're in lockdown and you know that the whole grid is going to suffer. Very real possibility. I live on a grid where if my energy usage goes up, like I've had to stop mining at home, and it's killing me because my utility doubled my rate.
Yeah.
And I complained. I called and was like, "Hey guys, it's kind of backwards. Normally, if you use more, don't you get a better deal?" And they were like, "Yeah, we don't do that here. Enjoy your bill." It's like, I wasn't even profitable mining. It was a total, kick to the teeth. But that can happen on some grids. They're just not configured to be able to handle midday primetime usage going up because they're used to kids being at school, parents being at work, or maybe work from home couples where it's like, okay, you got one room of lights on and a couple of 65-watt laptops going, and that's it.
Yep. So
the grid isn't ready for you to be home. Like, have the kids home, running Netflix in 2 rooms on 135-watt screens.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? And then, like, using the garage door opener multiple times throughout the day, right? It's a big consumer.
Yep.
And then doing a couple of other things, like maybe you have a water pump outside. Hopefully you don't need a sump pump on location, but maybe you do. Maybe you're working on some other stuff at home that consumes a little bit more. Scale that up to 10,000, 20,000, 60,000 additional families at home.
Yep.
And maybe you will have rolling outages even during lockdown. Won't be grid down, but yeah. So,
I mean, you brought up the point too. There's already grids that are experiencing that on a regular, right? So it's not even an event of people being home. There's already these experiences of, yeah. So when I'm on the East Coast, we've experienced it here. It's like there's major storms roll through, and it's like, oh well, now your grid's down, right? You West Coast especially. It's like this isn't even people. The majority of the population having to be staying at home and then doing what? Like they're not playing bridge. They're probably going to go immediately to electronics, and then so. Yep.
Right. I mean, thank goodness though. At least plasma screen TVs fell out of vogue. We'd be screwed. Right? It's like one person turns on their TV, all of Los Angeles, we're done.
That's it.
So
I should have listened to Seth.
They had their chance.
Yeah.
It's okay. We'll go in and we'll take their stuff.
What else you got on show and tell?
Yeah, I'm sorry. That was so dark. Show and tell. I've got a Gerber multi-tool. This, guys, and why a Gerber multi-tool? Something similar. I'm actually very partial to Leatherman. I've been using Gerber lately because I was like, you know what? I'll try something new. But a Gerber multi-tool, just anything. And this is just a way of life, man. I wear this guy almost all the time anyway. But just having a bunch of tools on hand so that if you need to deal with whatever in the event of, again, intermittent problems. This is not so much about being at home with your kids. I don't know who feels like they absolutely need to have a knife around their kids, right? It's like, oh, problems. So let me nope. Okay, we're gonna get Bryan back when we get him back. Speaking of intermittent outages. So guys, but some kind of handy tool that just helps you deal with, in the same way that having a flashlight is helpful, having some kind of a handy tool that's available as part of your kit for lockdown. And then just for having to deal with fewer items that you then have to clean or then have to work with. Let's see. Guys, do me a solid and hit me up in the comments. Let me know who here wants to see a bug out kit versus lockdown kit. There we go. There he is. Speaking of outages.
Yeah, I know, right? Oh, well.
So I mentioned, got the Gerber multi-tool. I'm partial to Leatherman also, but just something that helps you get stuff done. Nice. It just helps you get stuff done, man. In the same way that a flashlight is handy, most people, they underestimate the power of having a couple of blades, one straight edge blade and then one serrated blade.
Yep.
And then just a pair of pliers and having something else available so that you don't have to worry about carrying your toolkit downstairs with you if the lights go out.
Yeah.
Now, you just have the flashlight and this, and if you need to make any kind of small adjustments, you got everything you need on hand.
Yep. Or your headlight, whatever it is. Yeah.
Ideal. Yeah. Better. For sure.
Yeah. Yep.
So that's one other thing that I have there. A couple other things that are worth knowing about just during lockdown.
Are we doing?
Oh, wow. Okay. So you got the 4.5-inch fixed blade.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah.
This is I think the legal length.
Yep.
All right.
So yeah, no. What again? I think people also underestimate having a sharp instrument around for a multitude of purposes, especially if you're thinking about like, look, I happen to have axes on hand because I use firewood, right? But a simple knife like this is very handy when it comes to, I need to like make kindling or I need to sharpen instruments, etc. Like this is moving out of a lockdown scenario, but look, having a knife and understanding proper use of a knife is very wise.
Totally agreed. And to kind of make some commentary on the knife that you brought up, that's another Gerber, right? Full tang fixed blade.
Yep.
That matters. I'm going to show you another, a less practical blade that I just always keep handy, right? So I always keep a ballast on just because it's fun. It's a fun way to pass the time, right?
Yep.
Like it's just cool, right? It's not that practical. I could whittle with it, but realistically, I'm more likely to break that hinge and hurt myself than get anything done.
Yes.
So,
yep.
This is for fun. That's all it's for.
Yeah. And sure.
So, yeah, I mean, right. If they're right there. They're guys that know what to do with a ballast song and guys that just look cool waving one around. I'm not going to tell you which one I am. Probably guess. But yeah, a good fixed blade also, that makes total sense, man. And in the kitchen, that's where we keep most of our really good fixed blade stuff. But I've got some good utility knives too.
Yep.
As far as some other stuff for show and tell here, as far as just lockdown. Everybody should already have one at home, right? And I've got a brand name one, and this one is harder to put into a bug out kit because it's not in a nylon soft bag.
Yep.
But it can still go into a bug out kit or into a day pack. It's designed to fit into something small.
Yes.
Right? So, but I'm sure you'll agree, this is not enough, right?
Nope.
Not by a long shot.
It's better. It goes in the category better than nothing, and do your own research of what you actually really do need. That's great. It's a simple, I don't think about it. Here's a kit. There'll probably be something in here that's useful. pay attention to what you really need and use, and then build your kits around that. I mean, that's prepping, right? Like, here's what I need. Okay, extend it out a period of time, and then I'll build that out. So, speaking of bags, so this one's obviously a bright orange one. I love this group. Actually, it's a buddy of mine. So shameless plug for their stuff. But they do awesome nylon bags, and then inner seals with the marine class, so it's waterproof inside, etc.
Nice.
They've got a whole arsenal of different bags. Carrying stuff. I mean, we didn't really talk about it, but like having a means to either transport, carry things around, etc. Right? Most people don't have that. Look, nothing against it. I've got my Whole Foods bags. Look, Whole Foods bags better than a plastic bag, right? But at the same time, having something that's going to be a little more comfortable to walk around with, etc.
Yeah. And then to your point, if you have a lockdown scenario where it's not full grid down, but you just know that transportation is going to be different. So the way that you normally get around is just going to be different. Yep. Because you're going to have congestion. You might not feel, if it's practical for you to not take a car around, you might not feel like you want to go deal with the enhanced traffic of everyone being at home. Right. So, or being all in town, right? As opposed to congesting the freeways, they're all going to be in the city streets, right? So you've got gridlock there. So right here, medic bag, right? So drop bag for your hip. It's way comfy to use. I wouldn't say it's the best thing for everybody, but I like having one. Like, it's comfortable. For me, it's more comfortable than wearing a fanny pack as a dude. So, and it's about the same amount of capacity, a little bit more actually capacity than a fanny pack. And it's just way more comfortable to do a drop leg pack there. But to your point, as far as building up the first aid, just as a visual aid here, you know, I was like crap talking CVS before. They're actually pretty good at a couple things, right? So smaller supplies like this, if you know you need specifically just a little bit more in the event that, again, with lockdown, you're more likely to come into, just in my opinion, like you mentioned, do your own research, make sure it's the right situation for your exact scenario, right? Your exact location. But smaller lacerations, smaller bruises and cuts, you know, maybe you're just at home trying to make sure that you're tending to your own property. Maybe you have a garden. Maybe you have small amounts of livestock. So cutting yourself open while you're mending a fence, putting some baling wire around something, really common.
Yep.
So have the right amount of kit for your smaller lacerations. That's one more thing I'll say, like, to at least keep the basic first aid kit ready, you at least need to add more of the smaller laceration kit stuff because it's more frequent, and especially with kids.
And then worst comes to worst, a couple tubes of super glue. Look,
easier than a butterfly. No, it's easier. It's easier than doing your own butterflies or trying to stitch it up yourself.
Yep. I mean, that we just opened that, but like, if people have never experienced that, like in a worst case scenario, or not even worst case, having a tube of super glue around, if you've got a deeper laceration or cut, again, do your own research. This isn't advice. My personal experience is in those events when I have had that, it makes a world of difference. So
Whopper Goldstein brings up some really good escalation points there. We'll come back to that Whopper Goldstein in a minute, but let me just, Brian, you're right, man. Super glue is great because it's like, it's all purpose too, right? Like, hopefully you're never using it on your own skin, but yeah, if you had to, it's there, right? Let's talk a little bit about like practical personal considerations. Just be aware of this because your mileage may vary, but there are going to be some people who, for example, have seasonal allergies. What time of year is it right now? Well, it doesn't really matter. What time of year will it be a month or two from now, post lockdown?
Yep.
If you need allergy medication, maybe not even something prescription, be aware of that sort of thing. Like, you have to put yourself in the shoes of your future self 2, maybe 3 months from now, because lockdown may not happen for another month or two. So what does that person need? Yes. Have that stuff on hand. I just use this as an example. This stuff, really, really easy, right? And it keeps a really long time. It's not allergy medication, but it's something that for me, sometimes a year, I kind of need a little bit more to get cleared out at the beginning of the day. I keep spare and I keep enough, right? It's enough for me and my family. And then basic sanitation. Do you need something that is a specific type? No. No. You need something that'll keep, right? That's all that matters. So if you know that the style that you like will keep, go for it. You can tell who does the shopping in our house. My wife loves this stuff, right? She's like, oh, it's this beautiful, like fragrant Ayurvedic soap. I'm like,
okay.
Right? Yeah. Like,
give me some borax and lye.
Yeah. Right. Like, I mean, dude, I've gone Spartan on some campouts where I'm literally rubbing my body with like, baking soda, right? Where it's like, whatever gets the job done. So
you're exfoliating at the same time.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. It's like, is it really that healthy to bathe every day? I've done a lot of justification when I'm out camping, right? It's like, I'm good. Yeah. Wait till your bunkmate's like, dude, our tent is smelling kind of ripe. You might want to hit up the stream. Okay, fine. So, but anyway, not to get too weird about it, but enough of this, right? Yeah. Like this is where you're going to see bigger shortages on sanitation supplies. Right? So,
and that brings up a great point too. And I had this conversation with my wife, is for women, ladies, any sanitary products that you may like, use, etc., doesn't hurt to have supplies on hand, right? In general, some of those things can last for a long time. So keep a stock, right?
Yeah. Well, and especially like you're saying, so for the women in your life, right? The women of childbearing years of your life, they, as far as the creature comfort of deciding like, hey, they might not want to go off brand. They may have some very specific preferences with whatever the toiletry kit is and any of it. And if they don't want to go off brand, you got to think about that in advance.
Yep.
Because that's where it'll be like, oh, but I only use whatever this particular Hazel, which Hazel toner.
And that supply chain's gone now. So yeah.
So let's see. Oh, cool. So it sounds like we got some really good stuff. Oh my gosh, got some excellent trolls in the comments. Not going to dignify those with repetition, but they're great. So read the comments if you haven't already. Said no one ever. So yeah, it's just sanitation supplies, like you're saying, and it becomes a little more complicated. No more than usual when you've got mixed company, right? Especially women of childbearing years. I'm going to throw something out there that might get me some hate, but I know some women in my life who don't use paper products to deal with feminine hygiene. They use alternative products such as there's one called the Diva Cup. I'm not qualified to comment, but what I'll say is it's a paper-free product and reusable. So in a grid down scenario even, it keeps working. Something to look into. But I can't comment on it personally or directly. I know. I don't use that stuff. To any women watching, maybe look into it.
Do your own research.
Yeah, right. So, yep. But that's the last, almost the last bit of stuff that I have there. In the first aid kit, there may be some stuff that you don't already have. My take on it, especially the sanitizing stuff. Hydrogen peroxide, man, you just can't have too much of it. I mean, yep. Brian, what's the shelf life of hydrogen peroxide when correctly stored?
I don't know the figure, but a long time.
Yeah, right. I mean, if you're an adult, I imagine that at least some of the stock that you buy may survive you, right? Like potentially.
Yes.
So, yep. And then same with rubbing alcohol, yep. Not going to hurt.
Yep. And by the way, CD as well.
Fancy that.
Yeah. So, yeah.
So I think I'm hearing you loud and clear. Jumping back to water. Do your own research.
Yes.
But get some immediately. Right. This right here is this is a salve that I like to just have. And we're going to get into a little bit of prairie medicine here, just a little bit of like old school herbalist prairie medicine. But absolutely. The main active ingredient is comfrey root.
Yep.
And it's in East, you might call it a jow, right? But this is just a salve that has some comfrey root. And so it helps decrease bruising. And yeah.
Okay. So one of the other things you just landed on me is having a paper copy of Field Guide. Not for nothing, having it dawned on me. I thought of it last night, but again, this goes down, your network goes down. Have some books on hand, both for your leisure as well as for, hey, what in the world is out my front door? I might have never have been a Boy Scout and never been a Girl Scout, etc. But I can at least do this with my book and go, okay, I have more information in my hands now than I did if I'm just on my own. So to your point, might be worth having on hand of how to make your own herbal remedies with what's at your front door and not rely on this for it. So.
Oh yeah, totally. Yeah. Services that are most likely to go down, first to go down will definitely be your ISP. Yeah. Or potentially your ISP. So awesome. Let me show and tell one more thing, and then maybe we wrap it up. I think that we've hammered the CD point home, hopefully well enough. And the first major point, we spent literally an hour talking about the fact that, guys, food storage, completely secondary. In fact, in a lockdown scenario, you've got a full week to think about it. In worst, push came to shove, absolute worst lockdown scenario, you've got a full week to think about it. You will not die. You must have water.
Yep.
Yeah, figure it out. And then same with grid down, especially grid down, intermittent grid down. You don't have a whole lot of time to figure out where clean water is going to come from. So start there.
Yep.
This, for people in the audience who know what it is, you should have.
It's an ice scraper, right?
It's an ice scraper. It's a tool of sorts. Let's just say it's a more
high caliber ice scraper.
Yeah, actually, it's fairly low caliber. It's good for diameters of below 10 millimeters. And then back here, it can show you how many sheets of ice it will scrape. Definitely, I recommend for anybody in the audience who knows what this is versus its less capable brethren, you should have a couple of these, and you should have a couple of receivers that work with it, and you should try to get one that is universal with your matched set. That's my take on it, because you're going to decrease your burden for finding the correct fit after the fact. Some people think you should have a couple different types. I'm much more strongly of the opinion that you should go with a universal, and you should have it fit two different form factors, both for single hand use or for two hand use, standing, sitting, prone. If you can make it way easier to keep as much as you need on hand, my take on it is you should have as many of these around as possible.
I like how the analogy of ice scraper applied to sitting, standing, or prone. I was like, I'm tracking with you. This is hilarious.
Bryan, that's why I love these chats, man. We can rap. This is great. Yeah, Whopper Goldstein says we're finally getting realistic, and I do agree. If things got really bad, but let me make it more clear. If you needed to use an ice scraper to go out and scrape some of the necessary components for your food, yeah, because I think that's far more realistic in grid down, and that's far more realistic even in an SHTF scenario. If you're in a situation where you really think you need to use an ice scraper to scrape your neighbor's ice, you're not going to last long trying to scrape your neighbor's ice, because he's going to try to scrape your ice right back.
Yeah.
So if you'd rather use an ice scraper to go and harvest meat, that's probably a more likely use.
Yeah.
So. Yep. And I'll say also, you know what else is really handy in scraping ice is brass. So I'd say, and it's not always practical to reload your 9mm ice scrapers, but just because economically it doesn't make as much sense as certain others. However, any brass that you have of any type, very valuable in a grid down specifically scenario. And then lockdown also, man, it's just fun. Again, if you don't intend to go use your ice scraper on your friends, family, and neighbors, you can just go have fun and be like, hey, maybe you've got a best millimeter ice scraper. I like best millimeter. Some other people like 9mm more, but I really like best millimeter. So we can trade. Yeah. So yeah, that's just my take on it. But again, without making it weird, it's just when you think about prepping, Bryan, like you're saying, less from an attitude of scarcity and more from an attitude of like, no, we're just all prepared. And maybe I'm the first in my neighborhood. Maybe I'm the first in my family. And now, without acting crazy, we can just say, yeah, so the authorities are saying now with COVID-19, we should be thinking this way. So let's think this way.
It's building in resiliency into yourself and your family and then your community. I mean, that's the other way I look at it, right? Is preparing from a like the issue that tends to come up is in the moment of an urgent scenario. It's like, oh my goodness, I gotta prepare. And then it comes this frantic moment versus if you flip it and say, no, preparedness is about building, redundancies in your network, right? We are decentralizing our sustainability and ability to regenerate. That's a good thing, right? So preparing, in essence, for me, I look at that as it creates an embodiment of self power, right? Like I know certain things. There's some things I don't know, but I'm figuring out and learning how to feed my family or myself, right? I'm learning how to build woodsheds and other structures. I'm learning how to, all of these components, which then are just, they're self-empowering. It's like, your kid and you don't know how to rock climb. Like I took my daughter rock climbing. She doesn't know how to rock climb. And then all of a sudden she's like, I can rock climb now. And it's like, you feel good.
So Bryan, I'm gonna let you wrap really fast, and I am going to excuse myself for like exactly 2 minutes. I'll be right back.
Yeah. So I look at that from you're building a resiliency into yourself, and there's never a better moment to start than now, right? I mean, many I think of us, my generation, et cetera, we didn't really grow up with a framework or even say the lessons. I mean, look, they're pulling trades out of schools and teaching. So we grew up in a very, nothing wrong with it, tech-driven sort of intellectual realm. But when it comes to doing things hands-on, I think that's the other beautiful thing about preparing is you readopt I might not know how to do it, but I can figure it out. Or I'm laying down the plans to be able to figure this out in the event of that happening. It's just, you build in a resiliency. You build in that ability to life a different way, I guess you can put it, right? And it also goes back into problem solving. So you're never going to be fully prepared for any situation. But if you have a self-belief and empowerment that, well, I don't know every situation that's going to come my way, but I am willing to step into it and be okay with that, then that's pretty awesome. So, yeah. And I think that's part of the big elements with when it becomes to being a prepper or preparing. And then specifically in this scenario with COVID, look, we don't know what's going to happen. We don't know what's going to get mandated or passed down by local municipalities or state level or federal level. So it can't hurt to have the things that you might actually use on a daily basis just in hand. So, and that was a lot of the news that was coming out, at least people putting out of, I wish I had known before, or, when we were traveling, I wish we had done X, Y, Z. And it's sort of at that point, it becomes a reactionary, I wish. And that's, I guess, the different view of being a prepper or preparing is you're taking that stance. Look, random anecdote. My daughter, and she just started doing this on her own, but anytime she leaves the house, she just started getting into this. I was just about to tell like a little anecdote. My daughter on her own, anytime she left the house, would bring a bag with a couple of her toys, stuffed animals, snacks, and water. Anytime, like we'd be like, no, we're going to a birthday party. It's a 15-minute drive. And she would literally go and round up the things that like into her own little backpack and bring it with her on her own. Now, mind you, like I don't talk about like, I have a lot of conversations with my daughter, but it's not like I'm like, you need to prepare in every situation. She just started doing this on her own because in her mind, she's like, and I asked her, she's like, well, I don't know when I'm going to get there. You say it's 15 minutes, but I don't know when I'm going to get there. And I don't know if they're going to have the toys I like or the food that I like. So might as well just prepare and bring it with me. And then there's no problems. Right. And then she would start to share with kids and like everything. So I look at that as like a kind of funny thing of like my daughter's been doing that anyway. Like she's 6 years old and she's preparing for just any situation.
Dude, that is awesome. That is awesome. I love especially like you're talking about the activities, right? And being able to say like, well, whatever. I don't know what I'm going to be able to play with there. Maybe they won't have anything that I like. Yeah,
because like we can, as much as I can tell her, you'll have a ton of fun, et cetera. She's like, well, great, I hear you, but I won't know until I'm in that scenario. So might as well just look at the things that I have that I enjoy and the food that I know I can eat, and here's the water I can drink. I'll bring it with me. And, I was like, you're so smart. I'm learning from you. Children, wisdom. Yes.
Yeah. On that note, as far as there being like, so we mentioned special populations, right? And I don't want to say like every woman is part of the special population, but 50% of the population, if they're of childbearing age, then we mentioned there are some considerations for sanitary supplies. When it comes to kids too, similarly, right? Like, so you may have, maybe you have kids that are younger than toddlers, right? If you have infants, of course, same thing. If you know that like your baby, for example, takes a certain size diaper right now, what's kind of weird is that you may want to think a month or two in advance and say, all right, based on size right now, kids grow out of certain diaper sizes. So it's a little bit more tricky, but figuring out, can I get just a little bit more for that time? And obviously you don't want to overspend. So you might want to coordinate that with siblings or family if you have them close by and say, all right, can we stagger this? Or maybe you live in a neighborhood. It's much easier in the context of being parts of like part of a tribe, so to speak, right? So like a group.
And we didn't really hit on that. I mean, I think it's been in both our minds in the background of like that community aspect is huge. And here's the crazy thing. Even having those types of conversations with community and your tribe of saying like, hey, like if something actually does go down, like if we're on lockdown or grid down, would you be okay doing X? It's like your fire plan, right? With your family. Well, here's your extended family. Building that resiliency to be like, oh, you've got, your 10 months of food and food grade storage bins. Well, we've got, 200,000 gallons of water. It's a lot of water, but I got shipping rig full of water, right?
Yeah, right. Yeah, man-made lake back here. Yeah.
Exactly. But having those conversations to say like, look, if there is a fire, do you want to come up with a plan, right? Like people get to go and have games and game night.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and Brian, to your point,
maybe have those conversations with your
yeah. And to your point, that when the times that people die in fires is when they never had a plan, for like almost for sure. Generally speaking, if people have a fire escape plan, the outcomes are better. And same with this. The thing that turns grid down into SHTF is populations that don't have a plan, communities that don't have a plan. That's what turns it into SHTF.
That's a great, you know what? Let's use that analogy. When especially in schools and et cetera, fire drills, you do fire drills. And what do they say? Remain calm, right? Because if you panic and freak out, it's like, the person who's drowning. If you're drowning and you're freaking out, et cetera, what do they tell you as a lifeguard? Like, sorry, like that person's drowning and they're flailing and they will take you down. They do not know what they're doing.
Yeah, that's why they have the pole at the side of the pool. You don't jump in after them. Yeah.
So in that same regard, having these plans laid out and having the conversations allows it that much easier to go through and experience, if there ever is one, calmly. Here's the plan. And we can adjust accordingly, but at least we know we've practiced, if this doesn't work, then this. If this doesn't work, then this.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, totally. I got so I had there's a comment here in the comment section. I'm not gonna go too deep into it. Somebody asked about our ice scrapers, right? They brought down somebody in the comments says they're already on lockdown. They got the ankle bracelet. They're under house arrest. A little bit different. Hopefully you've still got municipal water going in your house. It's potable. But somebody asked about the ice scrapers and the idea of like, well, what if I need to scrape ice from all around my house? That signals to me, Brian, if you have to scrape ice from all around your house, signals to me that you haven't done a very good job of getting to know your neighbors or building a tribe. And there is no amount of preparation that will prepare you for that. None.
Yep.
None. If you're afraid of your neighbors, if you're afraid of your friends and neighbors and afraid of them coming to take what you have, you cannot have enough ice scrapers. You cannot have enough food. You cannot have enough water or medical supplies. In fact, having enough of those, having too much of those is then a liability because you don't know how to get along with the people who you're trying to survive with.
Yes.
So, yeah, having that plan. I'm really fortunate in the in the neighborhood where I am right now. We've got a plan. There is no ambiguity. Like I know exactly whose house I would report to. I'm not like the community leader. I am a community leader, but I'm not like the community leader. I go and report to somebody else. And I'm not going to go all Rick Grimes on everybody and, start telling everybody I'm in charge now. This is not a democracy. Like things would go absolutely crazy if that were the case. Yep. So we've got a little bit of a local community command structure. And it doesn't sound so weird now, does it? Now that everybody's talking about lockdown.
Nope.
6 months ago, everyone's like, oh, you're crazy.
It's resiliency.
Yeah.
And not only that, at a high level, it's resiliency. At a heart level, it's getting to know the people around you and building relationships, which creates resiliency.
Yeah. So, and I feel bad. Somebody's making comments about like, hey, Seth, you're holding out on us. Like, yeah, no, I mean, I hadn't talked to anybody about this. Like I've hinted at on some live streams and stuff that like I come from a community and from a background where preparation is extremely important. And like, sure, we can talk about, you and I can talk about this, but realistically, Bryan, other than like some cool ideas that we shared, I can't prepare for you. Right. And you can't prepare for me. And I can't make your neighbors turn to you as a good resource and try to partner with you. Like that goodwill is yours to build up, right? So
it's every person's, and that's what the whole meta narrative of this is. It's up to the individual, and that's also the huge moment that we have. Is every individual has this now ability to go into themselves and out to go, okay, what does matter, and how do we create these plans with people?
Yeah.
And I will also honor, it is freaky to start doing that, right? It's very like, if you have not done this or if you haven't grown up in an environment where this is common, it can be daunting and scary because you're stepping out of a comfort zone. Like you're literally stepping out of a comfort zone to say like, I'm going to build a relationship with my neighbor or my, person who lives in the apartment across from me. Yeah. But that might be the very thing that actually saves your asses.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, and realistically, I mean, to help kind of anybody who's in the comment, maybe watching right now and is worried, right? Like actually concerned, right? And feeling frantic. To your point, it is scary to think about it first. It's scary to contemplate it first, but realistically, it's no more scary than putting together like a will or putting together your first living trust. If as a, for estate planning, if you've ever thought about those things, maybe you have kids, maybe you don't have kids, but you're just at that phase of life where you're realizing like, oh yeah, I'm not going to be 23 forever. Like I'm mortal. Like when you first start considering that, this conversation about prepping, it doesn't seem that strange either, right? When you just make it very practical,
yeah,
right? and less about like the end of days. It's like no. I mean, like, who said it in the comment section? They said like, oh, we're all gonna die. It's like
yeah, we are.
Yeah, eventually. Sure.
Yeah.
So this is just an outgrowth of like, yeah, we're also gonna occasionally change jobs, right? And we're also gonna occasionally find that there's a sudden life change if you've had kids, right? Like that happens, right? Life changes really fast with kids, even when you think you're prepared in some other way.
Yep.
It doesn't hurt to have some things better prepared. So I want to address one more comment that I see in the comment section regarding that. Somebody's saying that it's good to have a bug out bag. And I think that's something we haven't really talked about yet. Not SHTF, but just the concept of a bug out bag. Let's help reframe this into something that's useful based on what we've already said and the idea that you still have to try to work towards goodwill and being part of a tribe. Mm-hmm. That's your best defense ever, always.
Yeah.
But what good is a bug out bag and what should be in a bug out bag, do you think?
Yeah. So I guess for folks, bug out bag is the like, here's my bag I pick up. And if I need to run with myself or my family, it's basically, that's your essentials, right? That is your survival bag and bug out bags is typically like, I can pick this up and go and know that everything that I need is in that bag. Right. And so that's a classic, prepper thing of basically like, you don't touch that bag. Your kids don't touch it, etc. Like, what's in there. Maybe they do touch it, but it's you showing them. But that's the, if it's like, I've got 3 seconds to grab one thing besides your family that we have to literally run with, that's the bag, right? So that's your bug out bag. Look, I think a lot of what we've covered already, I think even just showing this funny, like the stuff that you would want to have on hand anyway is kind of the stuff you want to have in that bug out bag. A multi-tool, right? Battery backup power, a headlamp, maybe some really high quality proteins, soaps, water purification tablets or a life straws type of thing.
Yeah.
Those
I'll say, walking this back a little bit for the bug out bag, you might want to go a little more Spartan and go with like hand sanitizer.
Yep, exactly. So it's your like essentials in essence. It's like, okay, so a life straw and water purification tab. Okay, now I know if I find water, which most likely you probably will in this country, then you can drink it, right? So good. Having 3 to a week's worth of supply of food in that bag. It depends on the size of your bag. Some people carry a lot more, right? And especially what type of bag you're carrying. If you've got a surplus military full tactical bag, well, you got room. So not a ton, but you can put some Spartan food substances in there that'll keep you alive as long as you've got water. So
right. I'm gonna add to that in the bug out bag, and especially for the people who are tuning in, because they come from our tech tribe, right, on crypto Twitter and everywhere else.
Yep.
Not your keys, not your crypto. If it burns down on a hard drive that you had in your house that literally caught on fire,
yep,
you're hosed. Back up your keys. Back up your wallets.
Back up your backups.
Yeah, right. Yeah, somebody who I had on the show not long ago, so Simon from the Loki Project, he mentions he uses a product called Veracrypt to encrypt these volumes. So you may already want to put a password on your wallets, right? So that may be enough for you. But you may want to encrypt the entire volume so that in the event that once you go mobile, for whatever reason, maybe it isn't a grid down situation. Maybe it's just that your home has some kind of a problem, right? You have a gas leak. You better not hang out. You better get out of there.
Yep.
And if you don't at least have, bare minimum records. So for crypto, if you know your crypto holder, have your crypto wallets on here, but also have your vital records on here. Your kids, if you want to prove that they are yours, you better have a legally binding photocopy of any of their relevant birth records and social security numbers. In the event that there's a shakedown in a grid down situation, you need vital records. Have them here.
Yep.
Like that's one that a lot of people, they say, okay, well, I'm going to escape with my life. And it's like, cool. But once your life is secured, how do you reconstruct it?
Well, not only that, you escape with your life, and then all of a sudden you hit a checkpoint somewhere and they say, great, okay, you say you're who? I don't know who they are. How do we know they're your family? And look, again, that's like, that goes into that, oh my goodness, is that ever going to happen? Like, Lord, I pray not, but at the same time, right? It's good to have.
Nope. There's that webcam. It's just doing amazing things. Yeah. So yeah, bug out bag. Somebody asked about bug out bag. And I think you bring up a really great point there. Somebody in the comment section mentioned having candles, and I disagree. And here's why. There's a time where having candles in a bug out bag made sense. I just don't think it quite makes the same sense anymore. Having fire starter and kindling makes sense. And knowing, because it's minimum viable fire, right? Minimum viable flame. And you can do that. A candle is meant to prolong fire and prolong flame, but it's not necessarily as helpful for, say, melting down something, like burning the ends of nylon rope. Maybe you have to cut paracord to specific lengths later on. Which, again, by the way, paracord, 550 paracord should be in your bug out bag. Yeah, right. Yeah, just enough. But again, mindset too, right? Like, so bug out bag, let me ask you, and I think I know the answer, Brian. Can you tie a bowline around yourself? A bowline knot. Okay. Can you tie it with your left hand? All right, get on. Got it. Well, hey, I'm not either, but I drilled it so much when I was a Boy Scout. I drilled it so much because the thought was, okay, let's say, yeah, exactly. You fall down the edge, fall off of something. Maybe it's not even a particularly steep, crevice or whatever, like or cliff, and you bust your right elbow. You're not going to want to be tying stuff with this, or mess up your right shoulder. You got to go lefty, and My other trick was, I'm very proud of this. My other trick was I could tie a bowline around myself, right or left, blindfolded. Because if you were to fall off of something sheer, like a sheer cliff because you're hiking or just whatever, branches can come out and scratch your eyes. Not permanently blind you, but make you blind enough that you just don't want to have your eyes open. So some of those right? Yeah, man, we're going to be like, all right, showdown. A little rope. Oh, who's going to tie their bowline first? But just knowing a couple of essential life-saving knots, you don't have to know, you have to be a sailor, right? Every knot ever created. But a couple of life-saving knots could literally save your life. So that's part of bug out bag kit is what's up here. Cool. Well, we've gotten a little bit over time, actually a lot over time. But yeah, I think so. Great thing. Here we go. Shameless plug. I learned this recently because it was recently changed, but apparently PIVX will allow you to do cold staking. So, hey, if you have to take your bug out bag and you got your PIVX here, you're still going to stake. Let's just hope there at any nodes keeping the chain alive, right? If it gets to that, we're in serious trouble. Last thing anyone's going to worry about is crypto. That said, I mean, we can talk about mesh networks. We can talk about all kinds of other stuff. One more thing for the bug out bag that I think is good and accessible: cheap walkies. They're so much better. Digital walkies are amazing. You remember the crap walkie-talkies that we had as kids? Dude. Yeah, right. But at the same time, to your point, if you have line of sight, you could practically go 2 miles with the cheap ones now, which is awesome. Yeah, it's a Fresnel lens, micro Fresnel. Yeah. To your point, I think also there are some of these that they use. They're almost like lenticular 3D prints where they have them cut out of basically cut out of plastic. It can be like credit card size. It can literally fit in your wallet. So there's no good reason not to have one in your bug out bag. Yeah. 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 No, totally agreed. For fire starters, candles, I think we kind of both agree that for the bug out bag, candles, while they may come in handy on some level, I mean, if you really feel like you have to do the old school waterproofing, right? Old school waterproofing of your matches, maybe you want to dip the tips of your matches in wax. Ooh, hey. Though you bring up a really great point there. As far as your bug out bag, you better have. Wait, what? Uh-oh. What do you guys mean he has no audio? Hold on, I'm getting reports here. Oh, I'm not piping it through. That's true. Let me just double check here, guys. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. You're right. So let me quickly. There you go. You're back. Sorry about that.
We're good.
So yeah, I had a little bit of a. Guys, I appreciate you saying that in the comment section. So where did you guys hear? Where did you guys hear that hodl guy got cut off? That's your new nickname now, in addition to Snappy. So you're now Snappy Hodl.
Snappy Hodl.
I guess. Maybe
that's my Middle Earth name, Snappy Hodl.
I think all you have to do is add a color to that somewhere, and apparently that's your stage name for after hours. I don't know. Yeah. Bronze Snappy Hodl.
Bronze Snappy Hodl.
There we go. Apologies, guys. Got another question in the comment section. Obviously, they'd be kind of trolling, right? About talking about like who doesn't sleep in the nude. And I will tell you, preppers don't sleep in the nude. If you wake up and your house is on fire, you do not want to run out into the bitter winter cold in the nude.
Nope.
So Brian's like, yeah, I definitely don't.
I just always have my clothes perfectly laid out right where I know they are, and I orient the legs so that I know when I reach. Boom. So anyway, there you go. Yeah,
nice. It sounds like we've changed some minds. I'm seeing in the comment section people talking about like, hey, I should have an encrypted USB at least with keys, right? And to the crypto community, right? We should know better, right? Don't like trust, but verify, firewall. Keep yourself protected, right? We know we've got to cover our own butts. That's just a good idea.
And copies. And you said copies of any ID of you and your family, like on there.
Yeah. And if you know you're doing really good encryption on the entire volume, there's no good reason you couldn't have everything go to a couple of those redundant copies. And again, within Linux, and I think also just I think you should have the same command in Mac OS under Bash, just a simple DD, full bit for bit backup from your initially encrypted volume over to a secondary volume. Your backups should take as long as it takes, like top speed, to write each bit from this to the backup volume. So yeah, and then there are graphical utilities that'll do it fast also, so your backups don't take long. But at any rate, yeah. So I think, was there anything we missed in terms of prepping?
Well, I mean, this is a conversation that is you can keep going on and on and on as we go into different tiers, right? So another one could be full on, like we could go down many different channels about like prepping and different philosophies, reviews of like what's necessary. And then, I mean, heck, this even dovetails into growing your own food and water remediation, like all which can topics in and of themselves. So I think for a crash course primer of how COVID-19 coronavirus is opening the doors for many people to realize, oh, maybe I should rely more on myself and actually empower myself to be able to do things. That's a good start. And I think that's a great thing. So
yeah. Awesome. Hopefully we've changed some people's minds about like whatever, just holding up in their apartment with a few cases of vodka and some frozen pizza, right? If that's your plan, it's not going to end well for you.
Yeah, I mean, vodka is a disinfectant too, so
right. Just not so great on the liver. It's not so great at disinfecting your liver.
I didn't say it was effective. I just yeah.
Awesome. Okay, well, Brian, appreciate your time, man. Why don't we go ahead and we'll call it then, guys? Unless there are any other questions from the comment section. Brian, thank you so much. Let me flash really quick there our disclaimer sign. This is going to go out to our audience. They're going to see the giant red sign that this is not legal or financial advice. And yeah, so back from that, in case people can't listen and hear us say this is not advice, right? But you've been disclaimed.
This is just a conversation amongst friends.
Yeah. Guys, thanks for watching to the end. Thank you so much for hitting that subscribe button, clicking the bell icon. You are the reason that I got out of my way to bring interesting people like Mr. Bryan Doreian onto the channel. And I love your face. We will catch you in the next one.
Ciao.